Welcome to the What Drives You podcast. I'm Kevin Miller. I produce this show to help us all continually discover where we want to go, why, and how to best get there, all the while enjoying the daily drive as much as the destinations we want to reach. In this episode, I've got a paradigm shift that I believe will alter your drive. We are all raised in this mono mind belief system. So the idea that we have one mind, right? And from this one mind, we have this infinite amount of differing thoughts and emotions and impulses and urges that we often feel are competing against each other, if not at war with each other. So we think of ourselves as our, here's our good self, and that was my bad self talking, and that was my healthy self, and that was my unhealthy aspects. And we don't understand, we get frustrated, even feel guilty that our one mind seems to be so schizophrenic, damaged in essence, pathological, whatever you want to say. Well, my guest today has a very different theory and perspective that to me is just profound. From his research, he believes we have a multiple personality. Not that we have multiple personalities, not the disorder, but we have a multiple personality, and all the parts are doing what they're supposed to do. And if we understand that, it can be significant. If we understand this, we can be in harmony to help our best selves. So Richard Schwartz, Dick Schwartz, he's an American systemic family therapist, academic, author, and creator of the internal family systems branch of therapy. It's referred to as IFS. He developed his foundational work with IFS in the 1980s after noticing that his clients were made up of many different pieces or parts of their self. Well, Dick is currently on the faculty of Harvard Medical School, and the latest of his 5 books is called No Bad Parts: Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with the Internal Family Systems Model. The foreword for the book is by renowned music artist. I'm a fan. I've listened to her since I was a kid, Alanis Morissette. And she credits Dick's work and IFS as revolutionizing her own therapy and person and life perspective, even bringing her to her core spirituality today. And people like famed physician Gabor Maté and psychologist Bessel Van Der Kolk, they attest to IFS and Dick's work with it as one of the most innovative and transformational therapies to have emerged in the present century. So I sat down with Dick to dig into the internal family systems and the message in his new book, No Bad Parts, to uncover how changing our paradigm on the different parts of our minds and bringing them together can significantly alter what drives us for the better. As you hear this, you got questions, comments, let me know. It's been such a joy to engage with you guys. Email me, kmiller@kevinmiller.co, and you can steer the question to the guest, in this case, Dick Schwartz. If you want, I'll get a response from him. What drives you becomes your reality. So let's create a better reality today. So drive with me a moment as we consider the multiple parts of our personality and how they can work together for us. Dick, I am thrilled to have you on here. As I got into your book, it's so amazing in this industry of self-help and self-improvement that I still so often come on to paths that I am unfamiliar with. And I'm excited about them because it gives me ever more hope of a new perspective to change and to grow. And this focus of yours it's so significant that it's like many others. I go, how did I not go down this path before? But thank God, here we are today, better late than never. So thank you.
Absolutely. You still look young, so plenty of time left.
Got time to implement it. And I, a saving grace of being a dad, as you know, is getting to pass it on. And
Right.
I am eager to do that. As we look at this, and of course, the show is called What Drives You. And right off the bat, as I'm, pretty quick, as I'm studying your work, I'm seeing that we are so often driven by as you say it, our parts. We're driven by our parts and not our true and healthy self. And you've helped me separate that. And I hope we do a good job of doing that today, that I am driven by all these expectations, these shoulds, these woundings, these damages, whatever, and not by the core of me, to the point do I even know the core of me. Am I tracking?
Exactly. And that's true for most of us. I was that way too before I stumbled into all this.
Tell me about that. So I read a little bit about your own story. I mean, that is the truth. You did not go after this. This wasn't something to major in school. This is something that through your therapy and doing it at this point, you finally came across and felt, in essence, like we've missed something. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, like to do the parts of me that were driving me justice, I'll go back into my family where I'm the oldest of 6 boys, and my father was a big shot medical researcher, endocrinologist, head of medicine at the big hospital here in Chicago. And I was supposed to be following in his footsteps. I was supposed to be a doctor, and 3 of my brothers are. And I didn't have a head for it. I just kind of had ADD, undiagnosed, and wasn't a good student. And as a result, he was pretty hard on me. He was really disappointed with me and didn't hold that back. And so parts of me picked up what I call the burden of worthlessness, or the sense that you're not valuable. And with that burden of worthlessness comes a kind of drive to prove that you are valuable.
Yeah.
So I had both, but I think partly because of the ADD, and I didn't have any direction in my life. And so I kind of meandered through college and got out of college, and I was a good athlete, but aside from that, I didn't have any particular talents or skills. Although I'd say proving my father wrong actually drove me in college to be a football player. I started in 4 years in this small school in Illinois. But getting out of college, not having any kind of purpose or direction, just floundered around and regained that sense of worthlessness. And all that was still very, very challenging for him. So he let me know all that. So when I stumbled into this, I decided I'd become a therapist, and I got a PhD, which was one step in the goal of redemption in his eyes. And I wasn't a great student in that program either, but I did find that I really loved helping people that way. And then I got a PhD in family therapy, and was one of these obnoxious family therapists that thought we'd found the Holy Grail, and people who worked with inside of people, psychoanalysts or psychodynamic therapists, were wasting their time because we could reorganize all that by just moving around families, restructuring these families, and got hired in an institute and decided to prove that, and did an outcome study with bulimia and their families, bulimic kids and their families, and found that straight family therapy didn't do the job. And that's when I started learning about these parts, because my clients, in response to my question of why he's still binging and purging, they would talk that language in parts. But the point of all that is the model probably wouldn't exist had I not been driven by these protective parts that wanted to prove my father wrong, and to also get redeemed by him. And so I was driven to do that, and that was useful in the sense that the model does exist now. But in terms of interpersonal relations and being a good leader of a movement, all that really got in my way. And so down the road, I had to work with the parts that were so hurt by him, so that I wouldn't be so sort of one-mindedly driven, and wouldn't be so hard on people around me, in a way modeling the way he was with me. So
I want to come into the protective parts, obviously, but I would also, because I read through that, it was a couple different analogies that you used, and believe me, it was one of them. So let's go ahead and use that as an analogy. So here you are doing therapy the normal way, the traditional way, family therapy, and you realize, wait, this is not helping this in the sense of somebody with bulimia. Why? Why was it? What, give a concept. Okay, family therapy addressed it this way, and this wasn't working.
Yeah. So, excuse me, I was trained in what was called structural family therapy. And we would make a map out of the family patterns. And the map would include who was aligned with whom, against whom, and who was polarized with whom, and who was protecting whom in the family. And we would interview families just to try and assess that. And then once we figured that out, we would try to restructure the family so that that wasn't happening anymore. And family therapy had found, which is often still true, a lot of times the kid with the symptom is maybe trying to distract from the parents' bad marriage. And if they can create enough problem focus, the parents won't fight and they'll protect this family that way. And so that was a lot of our focus, was not just the bad marriage, but just trying to free the symptom bearer, they called it, from being in this role of having to protect the family that way, or protect themselves from the family. And my hero in the field, his name is Salvador Minuchin, claimed to have a lot of really good luck with anorexia. And that's why I picked bulimia. I was, he was my father. I was going to prove to him that we could do something valuable too.
Right.
And so I found that I could reorganize the family. So the parents became aligned with each other more and got a little more distant. Because a lot of times when the parents are having trouble, one parent becomes too close to the kid with the symptom and obsessed with them, and the other parent kind of feels left out and sided against. And so we can change all of that. So the parents were prioritizing their own relationship and liberating the kid to be who she wanted to be. And still she would keep binging and purging. And I was so frustrated because I was so desperate to have this good outcome. So I started meeting with these kids individually and asking, so why? Why do you keep doing this? And that's when they started teaching me this model, because they would talk about these different parts that would make them do what they were doing, even though they didn't want to do it.
This is, again, counter to the aspect of you call it the mono mind belief system. So I want everybody to hear that, because honestly, it was new to me. I mean, we tend to think about ourselves, as you say in there, a mono mind belief system, idea that we have one mind. We have one mind. So I, Kevin, have one mind, and to pull out a scriptural reference, I don't do what I want to do, and I do what I don't want to do so often, and that's me.
Right.
But you bring me back to the idea of, or the reality, I hope, of, I am not my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been stuck on that. I don't go into something and say, gosh, I am angry. Well, no, I am Kevin, but anger is visiting me, or anger is upon me. The same thing, to say these things that are these parts of me that you call it, like the inner critic, or, these, well, you say different parts, but we think of it as, this is just all me. And I'm just trying to grip it, get a grip, be disciplined, keep the straight and narrow, and deal with myself. And you're saying, no, there's multiple selves, which gets sketchy at first, because you're talking about, this is not personality disorder, or what is it? What's the term? Dissociative?
Yeah. Dissociative identity disorder.
It's not that, but you are saying, well, there are different parts of me, which that feels freeing to say, no, I am me. These are different parts of me. go down that road with us, because that is for most people. And again, I'm in this industry and I have not really understood it in this capacity.
I appreciate that, Kevin. And it is relieving to most people to realize that this is just a part of you, even though it's causing a lot of damage in your family or to other people. It isn't you. It's just a part of you, and it isn't even bad. The last book I wrote was called No Bad Parts, because there aren't any bad ones. They're misguided. They're forced in, like the kid I was talking about in the family, who isn't naturally bulimic or whatever the symptom is, but is forced into that role by the dynamics of the family. These parts of us aren't what they seem either. They're, from my data collection, it's the nature of the mind to be multiple, just as you're saying, that people with that multiple personality problem aren't any different from the rest of us, except that their minds, their little sub-personalities, what I call parts, got blown apart more by the horrific trauma they suffered. But the fact that they have these little inner entities isn't any different from you and me. And that's a challenge to bring to this culture. Because, as you say, everybody thinks they live in this monomind idea where you have different emotions or different thoughts, but that's all they are. They aren't different personalities. So it's been a tough sell as I've tried to do this for the last 40 years. And for whatever reason, finally, it's sort of catching on in the culture. And I'm honored to be talking to you about it. But
well, again, the way you lay it out makes sense at face value. Yeah, it sounds kind of odd. Like, okay, gosh, I'm not just me. I'm, multiple me's or different aspects of me. But it is, as I was unpacking your message, I thought, oh gosh, it makes sense. And I thought about it on a couple of different levels. One is, if anybody's had enough of a substance, alcohol or whatever it may be, that's an easy one to pick on. But alcohol, and you've had too much, or you've witnessed somebody who had too much and realized, oh my gosh, they became something different. They became dramatically angry, or they became really funny, or really sad, or whatever. And my thought is, it's kind of just because we took the walls down, and that's kind of, you're seeing some of the raw stuff underneath there, but it feels like a different person. Or how many times have we been in a social situation or a threatening situation, or just uncomfortable or whatever, and we look back and go, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened to me. I was off.
Yeah.
I was like a different person. I was, or you've had somebody relate to you that way. Man, I was with a group of guys this weekend, and one of them at some point said, man, you're kind of quiet. You okay? And it wasn't my normal self. And I was kind of being a different part. I had something else on my mind, and I just wasn't feeling the social connection. So I was just listening and not being my normal, more talkative self. And you're saying, again, this is not a mono mind. You are these different things. And would I be relevant to say, and if I am constantly at war with those, I'm at war with myself. And that's where a lot of us find ourselves.
That's exactly right. And those are great examples. And some of those examples are a bit extreme, but even just, as you face a dilemma in your life and you hear one part of you saying, go for it, the other says, don't you dare.
Yeah.
Just these little dialogues we're having all the time. That's what we're talking about. That's not your mind, your one mind having this debate inside. It's these different parts of you arguing about the best course of action. So it's kind of like normal everyday life to hear their voices, which we think of as thoughts, and which is what I thought when I first encountered that first client back 40 years ago. That at first I thought, because I had a couple clients talking this language, I thought, well, these kids are sicker than I thought, because they're talking about these things as if they have a lot of autonomy and they have relationships with each other, and oh boy, maybe they have multiple personality disorder. Then I listened inside myself and, oh my God, I've got them too. And they're this sort of the same as my clients. And so that's when I got curious, and sort of the rest is history. Just really started to interview these clients about their parts, and then ultimately could even talk to the parts directly. And in doing that, the big radical shift came when I learned that a lot of these parts are inherently bad. Like, our field has always thought, we all have a kind of inner critic, and our field has said, well, that's just an internalization of your parents' voice, and you're just hearing how they yell at you all the time. That's all it is. And they thought of the binge as this out of control impulse, and that's all it is. But as I started to talk directly to these parts, which you can, or have my clients ask them questions and learn about them instead of fight with them, I came to learn that the critic is just trying to get you to behave. And the binge is just trying to get you away from some feeling that it doesn't think you can handle. And they're all in there just trying their best to keep you safe and to help in some way, even if it's misguided. And that was amazing. That was a huge revelation. And it's still pretty amazing this 40 years later.
Well, when you talked about that in the book, it reminded me of, and you have as one of the people that endorses your book is Terry Real.
Mm-hmm.
We had Terry on the show a couple times as well. And he talks, I'm going to do my own paraphrasing, but those tactics, those strategies that we employed as children, probably in an uncomfortable or threatening situation, but they served us well. If you had a parent who was abusive or was just, not around, negligent, or wasn't in touch with their emotions, or yada, yada, yada. And you learned how to adjust to protect yourself, that served you well. What a brilliant little kid to do that. And yet then we take that into adulthood and we're still doing those things, even though the threats don't really exist. That's what I thought of when you said, okay, here's a part that served you. It's not bad. It was doing what it's supposed to. Now today, that inner critic is killing you.
Right.
Because you're still utilizing that, but that as a part, as an entity, again, it's not bad, but, and I'm going to ask you to answer that. It's not bad, but we need to shift it to what?
Well, to its naturally valued state. Okay. So again, the idea is we're born with them. They come into the world with us because they all have valuable talents and qualities. And they get forced out of their naturally valuable states into roles that, like I say, can be damaging, like you're saying. And you just nailed it, because most of them are frozen in time during some trauma or some what's called attachment injury, some time when your parent neglected you or abandoned you or attacked you. And they live back there. They still live as if you're still 5 years old and the world is as dangerous now as it was back then.
Yeah.
So they're literally frozen in time. And they pick up these extreme beliefs and emotions that came into you during that time and now attach to these parts and drive them. Speaking of drive them like a virus. So all of that to say that if I were working with you, with one part of you, and I'd say, Kevin, just ask it how old it thinks you are. Most of the time, you get a single-digit answer. Most of them are stuck back when you were a child, and there was something really bad or scary happening, and they just got left behind back there. They got frozen in time. And literally, they think the world is now still as dangerous as it was back then. Because, I would say, Kevin, let this part know how old you really are. And a lot of times these parts are shocked. They had no idea. And they also thought you were still young, so they needed to protect you in that same way.
Along this line, what surprised me, well, you just mentioned attachment. So we just did a show with Thais Gibson on attachment. and went down that road. And of course, the place you want to be is securely attached. So here I am over as a dismissive avoidant. That's me. That's my nature, at least propensity. And I'm going to do the work.
Okay, wait. Let me pause you, Kevin.
Please.
Because you just said that's my nature. It's not your nature. It's a part of you.
Okay.
It's protective, right?
Okay. Fair.
You see the difference?
Yes. Well, I am now. This is new to me.
Yeah. Yeah. But go ahead.
Well, okay. So I am trying to, in health, move towards secure attachment. Okay. But with yours, we are looking at, here are all these parts of me. And the book is called, again, your latest book, No Bad Parts. But these are parts of me, and they tend to be, bring them from childhood, and they tend to be giving us some negative consequences. And they are all surrounding me at the core, self. That the goal is, because my first thought would be, oh, the goal is to get rid of those. Get rid of all those so that I am the self. I know you're not, you're saying no. Again, address that for us, though, because the parts still have their place, even in perfect health, which none of us can achieve. They still have a place. We're not getting rid of them. So
not only do they have a place, they're incredibly valuable, but not in the role that they're in. So we're just trying to liberate them so they can be in their valuable states. And there's a process for doing that.
Give us an example of, here you are, whether you want to use yourself or the bulimic or whatever, to say, okay, here's this part of them that's doing this. It's unhealthy today, and we changed it, or it evolved to X that now is helpful.
You want to try it? If you're up for it, I could.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So think of a part of you, like a protective part, that you have an attitude about, that gets in your way somehow. You might.
I did the exercise, one of the first in the book.
Okay.
And what came to mind was, and it probably is because I just spent 3 days, 3 nights with 7 other guys off on an adventure, doing mountain biking and whatever, sitting around the campfire. And it was good. I am kind of hyper aware of people, surroundings, myself, and I'm just wanting to be at peace. And so coming off of that, it's probably why it was acute. And so when I did the exercise to think about a feeling there, it was evaluating myself, evaluating others. I can put judgment by there too, but judging myself, but also others. And I just realized, man, these guys are, and I said it actually at the fire pit one time. I said, you guys are so comfortable in your skin. I so appreciate that you are. I have a hard time relating to that. I grew up in this environment, self-help, again, a great thing in and of itself, no bad parts. But I took a lot of that. You constantly, as a pro athlete, you're constantly evaluating yourself to improve. Right. You're evaluating others. You're learning by evaluating and judging, and it's good, or it has a place for performance. But now to bring that into life, and I'm going, oh my gosh, can I just chill out? So there.
Cool. Let's work with that.
Okay.
So you ready?
Yep.
So focus on that judgmental, evaluative part of you.
Yep.
And find it in your body or around your body.
Okay.
Where do you find it?
My first thought was just right in my chest.
Okay. And as you notice it there, how do you, Kevin, feel toward this judge inside?
Anxious.
So you're kind of scared of it.
Probably some worry, and even just some tiredness. Like, can I just let it go?
Okay. So both some worry that it might attack, and also just tired of being beaten by it all the time.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that it's always work. Like, will it just stop? Just give it a rest. Just
Yeah. So ask both the one who's so tired of it and also the one who's afraid of it, if they just give us a little space to get to know it and maybe help it not have to do this anymore. So just see if these 2 other parts would separate enough that you could just get curious about it.
if I look at it and not weigh it, but balance it somewhat, I would say, I appreciate where it helps me to be socially aware, to be self-aware, and to be in a group and connect and empathize, with somebody. I appreciate it there. And yet to come back, then I've got to, or I feel like what has been cognizant somewhat is they're not sitting around judging me or thinking about me. They just want me. They would be more at rest if I was as well. And these are my friends, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Let it go.
And I'm going to have you talk to this part inside. So
Okay.
focus again on your chest.
Yeah.
And can you get to a place where you're just curious about this part and why it does what it does?
Okay.
So ask it. Focus there and ask, what is afraid would happen if it didn't do this job inside of you? And don't think of the answer. Everybody has a tendency to think of the answer, but
That's exactly what I did right away. Yeah.
but just wait and see what comes back to you when you ask that question. So the thinking parts can relax back too.
Okay.
Direct that question toward this judging part, and just wait for the answer to come, whatever it is. What's it afraid would happen if you didn't do this?
It goes to my self-worth.
Yeah. And ask it more about that. Ask it more about how it's related to your self-worth.
Man, it's so much time from an early age of adopting, accepting, agreeing, whatever, taking on the role of I am my performance.
Okay. So let it know you get that.
Yeah.
That it just absorbed that burden from your family maybe or someplace. And it doesn't know what else to do. Just ask if that's true.
Yeah. That resonates right away, Dick, that it doesn't know this is part of my continual journey, that letting go or like addressing that seems like it should be okay, but it leaves me feeling like I just lost my footing.
Yeah. So, without that, you would feel unfamiliar. Like, is that what you say?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Kind of like standing around without pockets. Don't know what to do with your hands.
Yeah. So let this part know you get that it doesn't know what to do if it didn't do this job. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to help it with that. But so one question you could ask it is, let's just imagine that this family energy or whatever it is that drives it to be so critical and judgmental, let's just imagine we could unload that. It could let go of that energy. So it was liberated from this role.
Mm-hmm.
What might it like to do instead inside of you? And again, don't think. Just wait for the answer.
I like these pauses for the podcast. This will be interesting. The first thing that comes to mind is it would be more discerning to know when it's needed.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it would be more like an advisor. It wouldn't be on all the time, judging everything and you.
Yeah.
It would just help you make
An
decisions.
advisor. That's good. So from what to what? So from a judgmental critic to an advisor?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And Kevin, that's what most of these critics say. That's what they're naturally designed to do. And then they get forced into this judging role.
That's interesting. Yeah, because it hasn't felt like it's bad. It's just too much. It's just too constant. Yeah, and it comes in uninvited.
Yeah. So go back to it. Go back to it. And ask it if it would like to do that or if it's afraid to try that.
There's some fear.
Ask about the fear. What's you afraid would happen if it really unloaded this judgmental stuff and was freed up to be an advisor? What's it afraid would happen?
Mm. What came to mind is it's still attached to my self-identity, my self-worth, but really self-identity is what came to mind.
So it's trying to keep a certain identity for you
Yeah.
as a big athlete, or what's the identity it's attached to?
Oh gosh. Maybe again, I'm just gonna shoot first words. As a discerning person, probably. As a discerning, I like to be. There's security in being aware of my environment. Kind of like the Jason Bourne movie. If you've seen that, and it's after the very first Jason Bourne movie, and he'd been in the water and he comes out, he kind of has amnesia, and he sits down in a bar and says, "Why is it that I know?" And he names off all these things. He's super aware. And I looked at that and thought, "Oh, that gives me security." I'm usually that person, not because and I know I'm not Jason Bourne. There's nobody trying to kill me, but I do find security in knowing what's around me. So that discernment. So I think to let go is, which again, I witness people who are doing it, and I envy their peace.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
But let him know you get it.
Okay.
He's desperately trying to keep you safe and secure.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of why he does this.
Safe, secure, and I would also attach that to ego. Part of that is ego. I don't know that. Well, I'm not saying that I don't have some other threat inside me, but I know part of it is that's, and I think that's why self-identity came along.
Okay.
Yeah.
But let's stay with the safety for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So ask him if he protects a part that feels unsafe a lot of the time, and it feels a lot of anxiety in there.
Well, I mean, the first term, Dick, and this comes up quite a bit, is, this is not the news, the imposter syndrome. I'm still enamored by that because even in this role, sitting here right now, I know I'm good at what I do. I know I have a lot of insight, more than knowledge, even insight. I know all these things, and yet I'm still blown away by this constant part of imposter that's always been there. When I was a pro cyclist, I was always there. If I get on the line, even if I win the race, I think I didn't really do enough work. I didn't really do. It's kind of, I just pulled it off.
So that's different from this guy. That's the different part. Right? Am I right? I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
But as you talk about, I mean, I think that's, in part two, it's an overlap. Why parts blend, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Okay. So between the guy I started with and this imposter guy, they really have been driving you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And generally with an imposter part, it's protecting some other part that does feel like you're not good or you're not valuable or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh, actually, I'll throw it at you, Dick. I'm tempted to say there was an expectation, with all due respect to my parents. I won't even say that they gave it to. I adopted somehow an expectation that we were supposed to be better. That was what we were, a self-improvement family, high performance, no excuses, no limits. We were supposed to be better. And man, I adopted that hook, line, and sinker. So there was an expectation. And I had a therapist call me out kind of on the, the perfectionist role and the high. And they finally said, oh, so Kevin, you think you're actually better than everyone else. Everybody else gets grace. It's okay, but not you, because you're actually better.
Yeah.
Well, that felt really bad.
Well,
But track.
so yeah, you would have that burden of I've got to be the best or be better all the time. But also because they would judge you based on your performance, it's likely you had a part that didn't feel like you were that good.
Always. And that's or not the downside. I think it's all a downside, but that, I guess, if you lump it into the perfectionist side, yeah, I was never satisfied with the performance. Even that, it's a really interesting, I don't think I voiced it. Even if I'm standing on the podium and I actually won, I feel a little bit like, I just kind of pulled that off.
Yeah, that's the imposter way.
Yeah.
But there's probably what we call an exile in there who feels like he's only valuable if he performs and isn't valued otherwise. Does that resonate?
It does, Dick. And to be candid and open, hopefully my listeners will have grace on me. I think that I'm concerned that I tend to do that on other people too, that I'm basing them on their performance. I mean, as a father, I've had to let go and grapple with that some.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you just talked about this part that judges everybody all the time.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
That's the part that does that.
Yeah.
So you've got those protectors who are desperately trying to impress people so you get accolades and you get valued. And then you got this little guy in there who could never feel like you're really valuable.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't loved, not to badmouth your parents, but he wasn't loved just for being who he was.
And I want to say it because it's actually honest. It's hard for me to tap into that, to think that I wasn't loved or I was only loved for my performance. But it is the stereotypical parental tension, I think, that they gave accolades like, oh my gosh, you won, rock on, and tell everybody in the world. And that was my food. That was my sustenance. Right. And I took on to that. I've had to work with my kids to go, even now, when the kid's kicking butt in soccer and I could go along about the performance and say, oh man, I'm really proud of your effort and your dedication to the team, and not, I'm proud that you ran fast.
Exactly.
So difficult. So difficult.
Right. No, it is. It's easy to give a kid that wrong message.
Yeah.
Just based on our language, really.
Yeah. So I think in my ignorance, my parents just, gosh, of course, they clapped and applauded and bragged and whatever. And that became life for me.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, if we were to continue to work, I would ask these protectors, and we've met two of them so far, if they'd give us permission to go to the part they protect, which is usually a much younger child.
Yeah.
Who feels that sense of worthlessness or something like that.
I want to come back into that, but I want to grab onto it because you keep using the word, and it was really important to me, is protectors.
Yeah.
That, am I correct in saying that here we are as a self with lots of parts, lots of aspects, lots of wonderful attributes to who we are, these different parts. And as you said, I think in the book you wrote, not just thoughts, but parts of us. There are different parts. We're onions, and it's beautiful. There are different parts of us, layers, whatever, but different parts of us. And with those, generally, as a kid who's not mature, we're not wise, we're just based for survival, we utilize those to protect ourselves. That continues to weigh on me, and weigh on me in a good way, hopefully, but to weigh on me, it's got a lot of gravity, that life happens. And I've used this, we're going to use it now in your terminology. So far, I've used it as the stories rewrite. Something happens, an objective reality, whatever happens. we immediately, boom, our brain goes into action, doing what it's supposed to do, creates a story to help us make sense of things and protect ourselves. That's what's really, again, it's been so significant to me that my mind is automatically going to go to protect myself, even if there's not some great threat. It's just what it's programmed to do. And you're saying here are these parts, they are initially going to work to protect me. Okay, so is that so far? Am I tracking right?
Yeah, and again, I want to emphasize that that's not their nature. That's the role they've been forced into by things that happened to you when you were much younger. So, like the part we were just talking about wants to be just a discerning little advisor, but because of various things in your family and so on, you got stuck with this burden of needing to judge everything, yourself included, all the time. So now he is a protector, and you rely on him to a certain degree because, as you said, you and he are afraid if he didn't do his job, something bad might happen, right?
Sure.
And so if something bad does happen, he creates the story. See, you needed me.
Yeah.
You dropped your guard and here this happened to you. So, but a lot of times he's on guard all the time. So these bad things don't happen. But it takes a lot of energy to have that part be vigilant constantly and be judging constantly.
Yeah. One of these are on this topic. I mean, again, if we're not even born a self. We're born a self with these parts that, can we say, actually, I think you mentioned this in the book at some point. I mean, there's some genetic aspects. These parts have some programming already. Is that?
Yeah, well, there are what we call legacy burden.
Legacy, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. So if there was some big trauma in your ancestry, even centuries ago, the extreme beliefs and emotions, those burdens, get transferred down through the generations. So most of us have some legacy burdens. My father's side was Jewish, and most of them perished in the Holocaust. So I've had to do a lot of work with these Holocaust legacy burdens. I work with a lot of Black people who carry burdens from slavery and so on and so on. So it had nothing to do with my life, really, or with their lives. It's just that we come into the world with a lot of these extreme beliefs and emotions in place already attached to certain of our parts. And then bad things happen to us in our life. And so there are more burdens that get added to that pile we came in with. So,
which has to happen because we can't have perfect parenting, perfect upbringing.
That's right.
It requires us to, at some point, coming of age, at some point of maturity, would you say, to become aware?
Yeah, become aware. But so for me, trauma isn't inherently traumatizing. What's traumatizing is the effect that it has on all these parts. So unfortunately, most people, when something bad happened to you when you were younger or even recently, we've been told, just let it go. Don't look back.
Mm-hmm.
You can't change what happened. It's a rugged individualist culture, so just move on. What we wind up doing is moving on from the parts of us that were most hurt by the trauma, which generally are these very young inner children parts who are more sensitive to what happens. And whereas before they got hurt, before the trauma, they were these playful, loving, open, curious, creative inner children. After the trauma, they carry the burden of terror or of emotional pain or sense of betrayal or so on and so on, or a sense of worthlessness. These are the burdens they pick up from the trauma. And once they carry all that, they have the power to overwhelm us with those feelings and make it so it's hard to function, really.
Yeah.
Just make us feel terrible. So moving on generally means you lock away all that, thinking you're just moving on from the memories, but not realizing you're abandoning your most precious qualities simply because they got hurt. And once you have a bunch of what we call exiles, these exiled parts, you feel more delicate. The world seems more dangerous because so many things could trigger them. And if they get triggered, they explode out and they just take over and they pull you into those scenes that they're stuck in the past. So to counter that, other parts are forced to become protectors. And some of them protect you by managing your life so they never get triggered. So they might make sure no one gets close enough to hurt you again, or that you perform at a really high level to get accolades to counter the worthlessness,
Yeah.
or that you look perfect all the time so that people don't reject you. And a lot of those become these critics and judges inside because they're just doing their best to try and keep you in line. So those we call manager protectors, but the world has still a way of triggering those exiles. And when that happens, these flames of emotion threaten to consume you. So there's another set of parts that immediately try to get you higher than those flames, or douse them with some substance, or distract you until they burn themselves out. So we call those firefighters. They're fighting the flames of exile emotion. And most of us have a bunch of those. And we tend to hate those because they take us out of control. Or our managers tend to hate those because they take us out of control and they piss off people around us all the time. But from them, they think you're going to die if they don't do their job. And so they're going to do it even in the face of all kinds of vilification of them. And they don't care about the collateral damage to your relationships or to your body. They just got to get you away from this pain or terror right away. So that's the map of this inner territory after trauma, but if after you got traumatized, you didn't exile any parts, instead you embraced them, like you might hurt little kids and loved them up, they can unburden in the moment. They can let go of the beliefs and emotions they got from it. And then you can move on with your life without any lasting impact. So anyway.
It's so you were talking earlier, Dick, and I thought about the old study. It's in I use it as an analogy in my book. A lot of people do. The guy who did the study with I think it was mice or rats, where they gave them the smell of the chemical, smells like blueberries, and the shock. Blueberry, the smell, shock. And of course, they became scared of that smell, and they did however many generations down. So here's a little baby, again, mouse rat, 3 generations later that's born, give it the smell of blueberries in essence, and it shies away, has no reason to. Okay, that's an extreme example, but then today, well, I mean, that's a relevant example, but then that happens. Let's take, let's say that first generation, and they were literally, if they were given blueberries and shocked, that really happened. So these things really happen in our childhood or beyond that, but today they don't. And I want people to hear that because Dick, I've been even in therapy, address some of these issues that I have relationally and realize, where is the fear coming from? It makes no sense, because if we go to the end, okay, what if that person does do this, does think this, does react this way? They're not going to stay away. Right. What on earth am I afraid of? It makes no sense. And as I've talked about that, so many people relate. They step back, and if they can intellectually look at it, look at that part in essence, because it makes no sense whatsoever. And yet, and then I feel, and I think we as a culture tend to feel guilty. And like you said, and then it's guilty. And then I'm just going back to, okay, willpower. Come on. I know, come on, get over it, Kevin. You're bigger than this. And I'm fighting with what I think is that mono mind.
And then you're exiling that scared part of you.
Yeah.
Through the willpower.
Vilifying it. Yeah.
You're vilifying, and you're locking it away and saying, I'm not going to let you dominate me. I'm just going to do what I want,
Yeah.
and leaving it in the dust. And so it feels abandoned by you rather than nurtured by you, which is what it wants and needs.
And that's the question. So, I mean, that you've been studying this for a long time. You've been practicing that. Let's just say that better. Because this is, folks, I want to, as in most every show, this is not something that you're going to get the knowledge of today and go, oh, cool, great to know, and walk forward a better person. I mean, you're going to be a little bit better just from hearing the message here, but a little bit. You want to be a lot bit like me. I'm realizing I'm going to have to do the work probably forever. And that's my point, forever. That today something can happen to you, Dick Schwartz. Something can happen, a relational thing, a phone call, a circumstantial thing can happen, and you can be visited, boom, by that same part that started back when you were 5 years old or whatever. But the difference now than back then, before you knew this, is what? How showcase the scenario.
Well, I'll say two things. One is I've done a lot of unburdening, so I don't get triggered the same way.
Okay.
Many, many things. And my wife, Jean, still has a way of pulling up some parts I hadn't gotten to yet. So I still can get triggered. But what I've learned is if she does, and there's a part of me that gets really hurt by something she said or did, I don't try to get over it. I don't, just be a man. I go to that pain and I embrace it and I talk to it and in a loving way. So this is kind of attachment theory taken inside.
Okay.
I become the good attachment figure to that hurt little part of me. And it knows that I love it, even if Jean doesn't sometimes. And that's how I get secure attachment, because generally we're taught to move away from that pain. And now that part feels even more hurt. It's doubly hurt by her and then by me. And then it becomes even more desperate for redemption from her.
Right.
And or desperate that she might leave or something like that, because it feels so alone now. But if I can take good care of it, then it's okay for her to say this thing. It's not going to ruin our relationship. I can comfort it. And even if she did leave, I'd still be okay because I could take care of that little one.
Yeah.
So that's the difference, is I still get triggered, but I have an entirely different way of relating to my parts than I used to.
Okay, coming back to, well, not just continuing with the parts, what this has helped clarify to me is we have those moments, and I have more now than I used to, of probably feeling myself, being myself, just put it there. Kevin has been a doing. I'm a doing, a human doing. That's been most of my life. In these past however many years, it's been a journey towards being. And so to have those moments, I mean, there's pretty much daily at this point. I mean, it's my time in the morning, and gosh, there's multiple times usually during the day where I'm aware. Again, I'm saying this with awareness now of the vernacular and the construct that you're giving us here, that I feel myself, I'm aware of myself, and I'm finding that peace, and I find that. So to everybody who's been to that point, who experiences it, and then you go about and realize later in the day or at the end of the day or whatever, that you totally forgot about yourself and you have been going along. And now to use your vernacular or your, not your structure, your teaching, Dick, is to say, I was aware of myself, but then I went forward and my parts took over.
That's right.
If I'm unaware, and that's what was going to mind on drive. So here I am in a solid state. I'm centered. I'm good. I'm whatever in the morning, and I'm excited, motivated, inspired, driven there. Then I get up, something happens, and now my drive gets forfeited to a part, an unhealthy part, or an unaware part. How would you say that?
Yeah, it's a burning part.
Okay.
They're all valuable, but a lot of them carry these extreme beliefs and emotions that drive them. And so that part pushes you out of the driver's seat
Mm-hmm.
and takes over and does the driving now. And that by itself isn't even bad necessarily. It's when it feels like if it doesn't do that, something bad's going to happen. Like it feels some kind of desperation to take over, and it doesn't trust you to handle things.
Protecting again. We're back.
Yeah.
So am I being let? I mean, it feels like that's the constant. Like I need a 15-minute timer or a 60-minute timer going off and going,
Yeah.
what's driving you right now? What's leading
Who's
right
driving
now?
the bus? That's right.
Is
That's
it,
right.
is it, how would I say it? Because I want to say, is it, well, for like you define it differently for me, but is it a healthy part or is it a burden part?
It's a burden part, usually if it takes over automatically. So it's a burden part. And so, yeah, throughout the day, like when I came to do this podcast with you, I'm just checking. Are there parts of me worrying about something here? Is my heart open? Do I feel calm in my body? I'm checking all that. Do I have a big agenda? Am I trying to sell something here? All of that is an indication that parts are in the driver's seat. If my heart isn't open, for example, or if my breathing is shallow, so I'm just checking all that. And if I notice my heart isn't open, then I'll ask the part who's sitting in front of it to just relax back and trust me to be with Kevin. You don't have to take over. It always goes better if you let me relate to people. And now they do trust me, so I'll feel my heart open very quickly. It took a while for them to trust that I was safe enough to do. So basically, I'm saying there are ways to check how much you're in self, which, as you're saying, you're feeling for the first time these days, which is great. And then you check, okay, and it becomes a kind of life practice. You just go through your day noticing, am I in a part or am I in self? And if I'm in a part, is that okay? Or do I need to help this part trust me more?
It's so interesting. I mean, as so many things to come back to, I mean, foundationally, it requires me, if I'm going to do the work, if I'm going to benefit from this, I've got to continue focused on being, for one, stopping, slowing down, however you would phrase it, to be self-aware. Am I aware or am I just going on automatic?
That's right.
I wish manual cars weren't on the way out because I love the analogy. Every car is automatic and now electric and you don't do anything. But I think back now to, it feels like as a human, I'm more of a manual stick shift person. And I need to be aware of what I'm doing. Am I redlining it? Do I need to slow down? Is the engine overheating? Do I need to shift? And what is that? And this feels like this is the opportunity to shift gears. Because I don't want to just go 1 mile per hour and keep everything. I want to cruise along well.
Right.
I need to shift. How do I do that? Well, this is a way to go faster without redlining. Is that relevant?
And like your judging part, who would rather be an advisor, the driven part can be in the passenger seat next to you. It doesn't have to take over and drive. And it can, talk to you about let's go a little faster, but it doesn't have to be the one to make that happen.
You used the word, we mentioned it before, that could I say it's a red flag even when I realize, like you talked about the inner critic and you use the analogy of a drill sergeant. Like we all have this drill sergeant inside of us. And then you talk about, willpower, that's the common perspective, that we're this mono mind and we just got to get willpower to keep the crappy thoughts out. That in and of itself, I feel like that's probably a red flag when I'm looking at, when I'm aware that I'm using willpower. Actually, as I say that though, I also tend to think about when I know I'm medicating, whether that's, for me, it may be, okay, I got to get the right music on to get me in the right headspace, or I need to go do a workout, or I need a glass of wine or a glass of coffee or something. It was interesting. I was thinking about it earlier when you said something, Dick, that So I really enjoy wine. I have a good relationship, or I have a relationship with wine. I like that, but I don't overdo it from a drunkenness standpoint. But I am concerned because just from a health standpoint, it can make your sleep worse or whatever. But I realize that what I like about it is it's kind of the end of the day, and it's celebratory. I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to. I want to be looking forward to that
Mhm.
celebration. Even that now, you're making me think, why? Why does every night have to be capped with a celebratory thing? What is it in me that I need to be aware of?
You want to do another little piece of work around that?
Sure.
All right. So focus on that impulse to have that end of the day last and find that in your body. And don't think, just find it in your body, around your body.
Hmm. Really just my head.
Yeah. And as you notice it, how do you feel toward this one, this part?
How do I feel towards it? Kind of a relief, looking for a relief.
Yeah. So you value the way it can give you relief. Is that what you're saying?
It's almost more of a looking forward to that. It's not
Yeah.
even the glass of wine. It's the looking forward to it. Cause I realize, cause I go through a lot of times of not doing it. And I realize, oh, it's during literally making dinner, music, wine. And if I don't, and I sit there and sip tea or whatever, and now dinner's made, we can go, I don't really miss having it. I didn't need it. It's that looking forward to, again, a celebratory thing is what I thought of it as.
Okay. So the real impulse is just to kind of celebrate at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right.
Almost a
So,
ritual. Yeah.
yeah. So the wine is sort of secondary.
Yeah.
So let the partner know you get that,
Yeah.
that that's what it's really about. And ask it more about why that's so important to it, to have that end of the day ritual.
The first thought that came to mind was compartmentalizing. That's
Yeah.
probably what it is. It's a trigger to
You got to leave work behind.
leave work behind. And again, I like my work, but I can get so caught up in the
Yeah.
growth, the production, the
Right.
excitement, and there's worries too sometimes. But even in that, and then I know I need to be there for my family. So it's almost like the taking off the Mr. Rogers taking off the suit and putting
Right.
your slippers. I mean, I
Right.
literally do that. I have my rituals. I come in, hang my coat, put my Birkenstocks on, or go barefoot, and music. And what music is happening. And like tonight, I know what we're having for dinner, and and wine with that. I should be over in Europe. I just love that setting. Yeah.
So in my language, when you're working, you're so driven by that part who takes over the bus and is doing all the driving.
Uh-huh.
It just goes and goes and goes. That your other parts need this ritual to let that part know
Yes.
it's our turn now,
Yes.
and we're gonna run the rest of the evening, and you don't get your turn tomorrow. But
Yeah.
give us a break here.
Does compartmentalizing fit in that? Because as I think about that, I
Yeah,
have different segments. Right now, I've got two grandkids living with us, and they go to bed at 8 o'clock. So after 8 o'clock, it's another compartmentalization. I could turn that part of parenting off,
they should.
go to the next thing, and then there's the compartmentalization or the ending of going to bed, and I've got my little reading book lamp, and a book that I'm looking forward to. And I love that one, and
Yeah.
it's
So it's a message to especially to the driven part, that we all it needs to share. It needs to time share a bit.
hmm. Hmm. It's interesting. I have a one of my best friends, and a lot of times on Wednesdays, he's gotten into the habit of somebody gave him some high end. I can't remember what it was, whiskey, bourbon, something. I can't remember. some fancy stuff. And so every once in a while on a Wednesday, for some he'll come in, knock on my door, and he'll come in and sit right here next to me and hand me a glass with a little, a little shot of stuff. And it's like, this isn't the time. It doesn't compute. It doesn't fit into this. This is, I'm doing my thing.
This is the driven time.
Yeah.
That's for later.
Yeah.
So just to illustrate some of what I'm talking about, you kept saying, I don't know why wine is so important. Or earlier you were saying, I don't know why I feel this way or that. All it takes is doing a U-turn in your focus inside, and without thinking, just start asking those questions of these parts, and you'll get the answers.
You talked about, I was trying to think of the other analogy because you talked about bulimia. You had a story in the book, No Bad Parts, about, I think it was a girl that cut herself that you used, and getting in touch with that part that cut her and why. That stood out to me. Will you share that again as well, to look at, here's a part, and the part wasn't bad, but that part was cutting her for a specific reason. Yeah. Here's what happened, and now that part does X.
Yeah. So actually, it was that moment was a turning point in my journey with the model, because like I said earlier, I was working with this population of bulimic kids, and I was starting to, I was mainly getting them to fight with the critic or control the binge, and they were getting worse, but I didn't know what else to do. And then I had a client who not only binged and purged, but also cut herself. And I decided one session, I wasn't going to let her leave my office until that part had agreed not to do it, because it was driving me crazy. She'd show me the open wounds every session. And so I would badger this part, and she would badger it. Finally said, okay, I won't cut her this week. And I opened the door to the next session.
Yeah.
She had a big gash down the side of her face. And I just collapsed emotionally and spontaneously just said, I give up. I can't beat you with this, to the part. And the part said, I don't really want to beat you. And that was a turning point in the history of this model, because I shifted out of that coercive, we're going to beat you place, to just being purely curious.
Yeah.
I said, why do you do this to her then? And the part proceeded to tell the story of how when she was young, when she was a child, it needed to get her out of her body.
Yeah.
Because she was being abused, and it needed to contain the rage that would get her more abused. And so I shifted again. Now I'm not just curious, but I have an appreciation for the heroic role it played in her life.
Yeah.
It literally saved her life. And I could convey that to the part, and the part burst into tears because everyone had vilified it and tried to get rid of it. And here finally somebody was listening to it and talked about how it still needs to do this because of this or that. But as it talked about that, it became clear to me that it wasn't living in the present, that it actually still was living back when it needed to do that.
Yeah.
And that led me to what we call a retrieval, where we go in and we get these parts out of where they're frozen in time, and we bring them into the present and help them let go of these burdens they carry. And we did that with that cutting part. And when they let go of the burdens, they transform into their naturally valuable states. So it was,
go ahead.
It was parts like that. And then, I said, okay, maybe cutting parts aren't bad, but what about parts that molested little kids or murdered people? And so I deliberately went to work with those kinds of patients. I consulted to a treatment center for sex offenders for a while, for example. And lo and behold, you get curious about those parts, and they'll share their secret histories of how when the child was being abused, how they needed to take in the perpetrator's energy to protect the child from the perpetrator, and so on and so on. So it wasn't until I'd done a bunch of that I really could conclude that there are no bad parts. They're just all stuck in time and they carry these burdens from their bad experiences.
I mean, again, I'm so enamored with the foundation here that here we are, we're as kids, we've already established that we come in with, you said legacy burdens. So we have these parts. Again, it's so, I want people to hear this. We have a self, and we have our self is multiple parts to that entities, even if you want to call that, and that they have some programming before we're born, then we're born, and we can't help but to use those in a protective way. We come of age, we go out, we go to school, we go to college, we go to work, we do. Going back to that, to pick on that, the human doings, we never a place where we're taught to be. And without that, that's why we end up at 53 years old, or name somebody. I want people to think about the most, the most credible person they know, the wise person, the successful person, whatever, to know that all of us have aspects of us to come back. And you said this at the beginning of the show, that come back, they're stuck, as you said, if we haven't done the work, that are stuck, all of it. And we see this in ourselves, and we see it in other people, and go, holy smokes, where did that come from? You go, well, that's the part of them that's stuck back when they were 3 years old, 13 years old. We don't know. Something happened or was happening. They learned to cope with it this way. It was a coping mechanism to protect them. And without doing the work, that's stuck there. And Dick, I've been called out. It was probably a decade ago, maybe longer, 10, 15 years ago. And I had a buddy, and he said, dude, there's some rebellion. You got like a 15-year-old rebel in you that is still, I see it come out. Makes no sense. And he was totally right. It was me rebelling against some rule, some guideline, some whatever. Because what he pointed out is, it doesn't even matter, dude. You're just doing it just to rebel against that. That's not mature. And after being irritated with him, I had to agree.
And that message that that's not mature is likely to get you to try to exile that part.
Yes.
Which is the opposite of what we're trying to do. So if he was to say, I see there's still a 15-year-old in you and probably needs your attention, and you were then to focus on that part and ask why it rebels so much, and it would show you where it's stuck in the past, and you could get it out of there. That's an entirely different way of relating internally than, dude, why don't you grow up? What's wrong with you?
What, Dick, is a tangible way? So they're hearing this like I am, and they get it conceptually. And well, again, this is something to work through. Go get the book, work through it. But telltale signs, red flags, if you will, of you're going through your day. If you want to know where the bad parts are, because it's easy to think of, okay, any negative thought, but it's probably not that fair or that simple. How are we?
It is kind of that simple. Yeah.
Really?
Most negative thoughts are coming from parts. They're curriculum burdens. So that's one way. Yeah. So as I was saying, I go through my day and I'm checking how much I'm in self, but I'm also noticing if there are any extreme parts that are coming my way. And sometimes it's a fear of being seen by the public. That I was very shy as a kid and didn't talk to a girl till I left for college, basically. And so there's still a shy part of me. And so in certain circumstances, I'll notice that the desire to not be seen, or the desire to choke my throat even. And it doesn't happen much anymore, but in certain circumstances, it still will. But I'm just kind of note you get a felt sense of these parts as you go through the life, doing what you're advocating, which is to become more self-aware. Just noticing, like you could have your audience right now, just stop, focus inside, notice what's happening in there. Notice what kind of sensations you're having, what kind of emotions, what kind of places in your body are tense or not tense. Notice. So as you get more familiar with them, because you're not just thinking, oh, there's this thought. You're saying, oh, here's what we call a trailhead. Let me follow that and find the part it's coming from. So as you get to know these parts, you notice their signature in your body as you go through the day. And you say, oh, okay, there's that scared part again. Okay, just I'll talk to you later tonight, but right now, just I'm not going to forget about you, but right now, give me a little space so I can do what I'm supposed to do, and I'll talk to you later. So you just become very much more not just self-aware, but parts aware, and then you bookmark every part that you need to follow up with.
So let me play with this, or not play, work through it a little bit. So if we take, again, I'll pick on guys, historically not in touch with their emotions, which is why I was prescribed and utilized Brene Brown's book, literally Atlas of the Heart, 87 emotions. And I'll go review that and try to get more understanding vernacular around what I'm feeling. So in this sense, I'm looking to be aware of negative thoughts. You said it can be that simple. So what are my feelings? What are my emotions? Do I feel uncomfortable? Do I feel threatened? Do I feel just angry? Any guy's going to attest, I just feel angry or frustrated, or somebody may say, gosh, I get that sad feeling, whatever. So that's one aspect.
Or am I judging? Am I judging myself? Am I judging others? Now you know this judging part.
Yes.
So you're going to be a little more acutely aware of when it's active. And, ideally you'd be able to heal what it's protecting, and then it could be totally liberated. But in the meantime, as you get to know it, you can just remind it, you don't have to do it all the time. You can let me just be present with people. So it's like that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I wanted to come to that too. Well, I did want to put in there and I'm thinking about myself, but for folks to hear that if I tend to medicate. I'm very aware of that. And I've had therapists, Kevin, you got to sit with it. Don't go for a run. Don't crank the music. Don't get another beverage, tea, coffee, wine, whatever. I'm always, well, as you can see for this show, I also get dry mouth when I speak, but I'm always, toting a beverage with something to adjust my feelings. You're saying just sit in it. Okay. But being aware of it, what is stark to me, and we hit on this, I just want to expound on it again, is that even if I do become aware of it, my tendency has then been to deny it. I just wrote this down as you're talking. Deny it, reject it, strangle it, stuff it. Those are mine. Now, other people, maybe you can help me with that. Other people, might vent it, whatever. But you're saying none of those things we're still, because that's still fighting or giving into it. Is that?
It's fighting it's fighting or blending with it. One or the other. It's trying to lock it away, or it's letting it totally take over. So the best metaphor actually for this whole process is, I don't know about you, but in high school I read Lord of the Flies. Remember that book?
What was it called?
Lord of the Flies.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have it at the house. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about, inside of you are a bunch of little kids. They're scared, and there's no, until yourself shows up, there's no leadership. Mm. And so they fight with each other, and they also take on responsibilities that they're not prepared for. And they don't know about self a lot of the time. But as you start to emerge, you can reassure them that there is a grown-up in here that can handle all this, and you love them all, but they don't have to do this for you all the time. And they're relieved. They're waiting for somebody to show up like you. And so that's a big part of the work, is just helping them see, helping that judging part see it really doesn't have to keep you safe in the way it did maybe at one time.
Yeah.
And it can be an advisor instead of a constant evaluator.
It's a great analogy. I mean, coming to drive that, we're wanting to, that's the point of my book, is working through to figure out what is driving you, what do you want and why, and really, being in agreement with that. That's alignment, because something's going to drive you. That's my shtick, is that you are driven. It's all in there. You just need to get it directed in the right way and get it in gear. You just used the word leadership, and you use that. That's in your book, No Bad Parts, talking about self leadership. Because and now to put it in the concept here, that I am looking to do the work so that I'm aware of myself and my parts, and that I am the leader. As you just said, I'm the leader. I'm leading this thing, and I'm benefiting from these parts. If I'm
Absolutely.
not, or the counter of that is, here I am as a self being led by my negative, or in this sense, it just, again, is so significant to me to think of my protective parts, my protective self that so often doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. But it makes sense when you get to know it, and it shows you where it's stuck in the past.
Yes, it doesn't make sense in the current
In the
circumstances
present, that's right.
of my life,
That's right.
but it did back then. Okay, again, thank you for constantly bringing it back, because I obviously, this is going to be a big work for me. My tendency is still going to be to vilify it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's another part that, you know, is worth some work too. It's the part that tends to do that, because the more you vilify and try to get rid of parts, the more extreme they become. So you either succeed in locking them up, in which case you have to tread lightly, you're constantly on guard in case they come back at you, or you don't succeed and they constantly come at you. Either way, it's not great.
It's so interesting. It reminds me then, you just depicted again when we vilify it. So I'm a fan of Anthony DeMello, and him talking about, and again, I'm going to paraphrase, that when we just unaware embrace, something that's not healthy, and when we reject it, it's not either. It still owns us. We're still reacting to it. We're not leading it in this sense. So if we take this and vilify, which is obviously, I've said it multiple times here, my tendency is to take that thing and vilify. If I do that, I'm not leading well.
No, if you think of, excuse me, a corporation, and the CEO is playing favorites and is being very critical of some people and over promoting others, that doesn't work. So why would it work inside of you?
You do talk, and I want to bring us to this point, in the aspect of, here are these parts, and if it's a healthy part and you're aware of it, great, you're good. All of us have these parts, and what your terminology is, that have a burden on them. They are burdened parts, and we've used that word, and from that, they're generally protecting. Now, under burdens, as you talk about that in the book, let me think how to say that, or you can say it better, but you attach them. That burden comes from generally a belief. I got that right?
Belief or an extreme emotion. That's the definition of a burden.
Okay.
An extreme belief or emotion that came into your system during a trauma, or could be a trauma that your ancestors suffered decades ago, and then gets passed down epigenetically, like you were talking about earlier with the mice. So it's an extreme belief or emotion, comes into you during the trauma. This part gets frozen during that trauma, carrying that same belief and emotion that you had initially, while the rest of you moves on, and then gets stuck with that, and then we vilify it because it makes you too scared still.
As I went through a minute ago, so we're being aware of the emotion, the feeling, the negative thought, whatever, we're doing that. We're trying to step back and go through the exercise that you've taken me through, I know at a shallow level, but taking me through on a couple of things. Is that a relevant aspect to be looking for, to go, okay, what is happening here? Where do I, like you said, where do I feel it? But am I by proxy somewhat looking for, can I conceptualize that? I'm looking for a belief. Somewhere there's a belief that I have attached to, I have unknowingly, subconsciously agreed with, but there's a belief, because if so, and we know the power of beliefs, that I have to go, well, how would you say it? I have to go figure out, root out, what is the belief, question it. Do I still agree with that? And get rid of it or replace it with a different belief?
Yeah. Well, and again, the language is important because you said I have to figure it out.
Okay.
But instead, I have you focus on it, use it as what we call a trailhead to find the part from which the belief is emanating, and then get into dialogue with the part and begin to relate to it in a different way. And then get it out of where it's stuck in the past, where it got the belief. And there's a literal process for doing that. And then help it unload that belief once it trusts it doesn't have to keep it anymore. So that's what we call unburdening. And after it's willing to give that belief up, it's like magic. It immediately transforms into its naturally valuable state.
Come back to you just graciously, correcting me on me saying figure it out, because last week I got much less graciously called out by my brother on a similar thing of saying I got to figure it out. And he says, you don't have to figure it out. Go there, because that's common, especially amongst the doing crowd. That's what we hear this thing and go, okay, man, I heard this great message on, no bad parts and the thought is a part. It's great. So I'm going to figure this out and be free of it. And you say, no, don't figure it out. But that doesn't relate to a lot of us. So help it.
No, I get that. A lot of you and me as well got where you've gotten to because of this cognitive part that's so good at figuring things out. And so we come to really rely on it. And a lot of therapies are about figuring it out.
Yeah.
Getting insight into why you do things. So there's a big momentum in the direction of relying on these thinking parts. And so when I'm working with someone like you, I'm actually, the first part we're going to work with is the one who thinks it's got to figure it out. And there's a way to convince it to just give us a break and go relax for a while and let you be Kevin without the thinking part for a little while. And from that place, begin to explore these other parts. Because if the thinking part hangs around the whole time, you're not going to get much information inside.
And that is, to get rid of the thinking, back to.
And watch your language again.
Okay, what?
We're not getting rid of the thinking. We're just asking it to relax for a little while.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting. I'm literally practicing right now from following Thomas Keating, a centered prayer type meditation, which you're right. It's not to get rid of the thought, but it's to just not focus on it, not give it all my attention. Let it pass through, say hi, repeat a word, a sacred word.
Or just ask it to step back for a little while.
Step back for
our language. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting, and I can't, you've brought me back again to this. The books, your latest book, most recent one, a couple of years, but no bad parts. Even that, going back to that term of, because that's where we've been with this mono mind. Again, that's where we're starting. I'm circling back, folks, and this mono mind, and realizing that no, we are separate parts, and that there are no bad parts. Now they may be stuck in bad roles. Is that fair? Okay.
That's right.
In bad roles, but they in itself are not bad. That is hard to, I can hear that and nod. That is hard. Back to, again, my natural tendency to vilify some of this stuff, to look at it and go, well, it must be, it's hurting somebody. Now, it may not be as bad as cutting or molesting or whatever, but this part of me that goes to judgment or to anger or whatever, to say, no, that is a bad, how can I say that that's not bad? But you would say, it is stuck in a bad or harmful role currently.
Yeah, it's a bad or harmful role. It's like an acting out kid in a family. The kid himself isn't bad, but he's in this role where he hurts people. And the goal is to liberate him from having to do that and be who he's designed to be. And it just is total parallel in this inner world.
Do you look at the parts as for yourself and what you teach people to do to get us to, one, become aware of them, that they are parts. They're not all of us they're a part of, these are parts that in health, growth, they go from negative tools to positive tools, or they become friends. How do you depict it?
Both, yeah. So some of them, the protectors, like your judging part, already said it would rather be an advisor. It would rather help you be discerning. So they become assistants rather than driving the bus. They're just helping you drive the bus. Others, like I said earlier, particularly these exiles, just help you play. Most of us, in terms of growing up and becoming mature, wind up pushing away from all our playful parts. And as we heal those parts and bring them back into our bodies, into our lives, we become much more playful and a lot more fun. So different parts have different roles when they're unburdened. So that's the way it is, yeah.
I was going to paint a picture. If you were standing on stage talking to a bunch of people, well, you are. We're talking here. It's going to go out to a zillion people. Assuming that they do the work. Now, whoever hears this, and I mean, again, it's a benefit for your awareness, and it'll help make kind of like Dan Harris's thing. Maybe you'll be 10% happier or better, or 5% or 1%, whatever. That's great. For those though that are going to actually go, okay, I'm going to do some work on this. I'm going to dig in. Well, and I usually ask this at the end of the show. I will ask it now. I mean, obviously they can go get your book. Where else can folks engage with? Is there another place to engage, or is that the source?
That book is for the public.
Yeah.
And I also wrote 2 others. One is called An Introduction to Internal Family Systems, and the other is called You're the One You've Been Waiting For, which is about relationships and how they work with attest. So those are the books for the public. And we are now trying to put together other things for the public. Up till now, our focus has mainly been to train therapists to do this with people, but we, for a variety of reasons, want to bring it more directly to the public. So we don't have those products completed yet.
Well, so then folks go to Amazon, type in Dr. Richard Schwartz. This book that has been my muse for this is No Bad Parts, but then he's got the other. So let's say somebody gets the book, they're doing the work. I want to know for myself and for everyone, for those who are going to dig in, where are I don't know if it's best to ask, from a mindset standpoint, what's the mindset? Okay, I'm going to go with that. If there's a better perspective, tell me, but a mindset that you would say, okay, for those of you who look at it this way, you're going to have the best chance of being able to engage and utilize and benefit from this. For those of you, your mindset's over here, it's going to be a stumbling block. Almost a way of asking, where do you see people who are able to take this and go forward, and what is it that handicaps others and they don't find themselves able to engage or benefit from it?
Well, we ran into the part of you that vilifies these other parts of you.
Yeah.
And that's an obstacle. And ideally, that would be the first part you're going to work with. Between that and your thinking part and the judging part, those would be the parts we'd start with. And as you separate from them, you would negotiate with them permission to not jump in when you're trying to get to know other parts, even other parts that they typically don't like or even hate. So to the degree that people can do that, in other words, we don't want people to start working with exiled parts until they can access enough self so that it's safe. Because if you were to try to work with one of your little guys from that driven part, for example, who's trying to get him to quit being sad and, buck up, and that just makes it worse for him.
The drill sergeant. Yeah,
the drill sergeant. But if you come from first curiosity and then compassion for that little guy, then it's a totally different experience, and he really feels like he belongs and you care about him. And He doesn't have to stay locked up.
Hmm. It reminds me, Dick, and I say reminds me, I think you said this somewhere in your book or related to it somewhat. If I came to it, I'm thinking about my own muse. If I come to myself in this journey like I would my kid, my
Right.
younger kid, come with that, because you just use the words compassion and caring and understanding. If I do that and not as I tend to come to myself, which is the
That's
drill
right.
sergeant, the willpower, the figuring it out.
That's right. And it's all parallel, because if you don't like that part of you because he's too weak or whatever, he's too scared, then it's going to be very hard when your kid acts like that part of you to not have that drill sergeant go off on you, even subtly, even if it's not a big overt thing like it is inside. Your kid will pick up on that energy that's not okay. So if you want to be a good parent, it really behooves you to go to the parts of you that you would have trouble with in your kid.
Yeah.
And be able to be with those parts with compassion.
Probably a great way to cap us right there. If we can have compassion, it feels like that's such a thread of this is understanding and then compassion. Dick, thank you for being here, for sharing this. I'm always eager to share it with everybody, but I got to admit that it's another aspect of hope to grow, to find more peace for myself. And it's just significant. Again, taking me through out of the mono mind and the fighting. Yeah. The vilifying, the willpower, the drill sergeant, the gripping, and to acknowledging, being aware, and understanding the parts of me. There are no bad parts. Again, it's a great title of the book. It's probably the next tattoo I get. No bad parts.
That'd be great.
Thank you for this. And thank you for the time.
Well, I loved it, Kevin. And I really appreciate your being so open about your foibles and these different parts of you and letting me try to help you with some of it. I think it's been great.
Well, thank you. Friends, thanks for joining me on this drive. Again, that is Dr. Richard Schwartz, often referred to as Dick Schwartz, and his book, this latest one that's incredibly popular right now. It's selling so much, as it should, is called No Bad Parts: Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with the Internal Family Systems Model. You can buy that anywhere you want. You can connect with Richard anywhere. Just type in Richard Schwartz. You'll find him. He's all over the place right now. Until next time, folks, I hope this episode helps you drive further and, most of all, enjoy the ride. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.